There is nothing better than a top three matchup talking Tuesday on the podcast daily. That's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. It's a big week, Bill. It's Ohio State and Oregon. It's finally here. We've spent all year saying, whoa, is this the biggest matchup? Is this the most important one for Ohio State? Is this the toughest opponent? Can they handle traveling across the country? It's all here, baby. It's time for the big one.
It is. I'm glad, there was a time early in the season too where I thought Oregon might mess this up. So I'm glad, when Oregon was messing around with Idaho and nearly taking a loss to Boise State, I was getting a little nervous that this game wouldn't quite pack the punch that people were hoping that it would. But now we're here. They're both unbeaten. I think this certainly has the opportunity to be the biggest and best game of the college football season, and I'm fired up for it.
I also thought even on Friday night at times that maybe Oregon might mess up and not make this a top three matchup. But then the rest of the college football world lost its mind on Saturday with a bunch of results and outcomes that we didn't see coming. But that made it number 2 Ohio State and number 3 Oregon, according to the AP poll, which we all know is the most respected poll in the world. He's Bill Landis. I'm Austin Ward. It is Tuesday on the podcast daily. We are going to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center later on, and we're going to talk to Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Will Howard. So, going to be a pretty offensive-centric day. Maybe we'll squeeze in some defensive questions for Ryan Day, because I do have a couple on my mind, but I think offense is probably going to be the order of Tuesday. Where will you begin, Bill?
I just got a bunch of questions for Chip Kelly about coaching against Oregon and what that's going to be like.
Oh, you do?
And how weird it's going to be.
Let me give you a tip, bud. You're not going to have to ask him. Let everybody else do that. All right.
Which is hilarious because he was the coach at UCLA for 6 years. He's done this before.
Just wait till next year.
Yeah. This is not a new opportunity for Chip Kelly. No, I will not be asking about that. It is a little, I get why we're talking to Chip. I wish you were talking to Jim Knowles, because I find the Ohio State defensive matchup against Oregon's offense a little more compelling than the inverse of that. Although it's a great matchup either way, so I'm not too upset about it. I guess maybe on the offensive side, since we are talking to Chip and Ryan Day, and this is less so for Will Howard, I guess, but I have been very impressed by the Ohio State offensive line, as I know a lot of people have through these first 5 games. And I like too that there has been a gradual ramp up in the competition that Ohio State has faced along the defensive lines of its opponents, and I think has sort of answered that bell along the way. And this is, in my opinion, another one. I think a different kind of test than what Iowa proposed, which was, fundamentally sound, strong, stout, just not going to get kind of out executed. It's just sort of like mano a mano, can you win your assignment kind of thing. And Ohio State definitely did that against Iowa. This now matchup with Oregon, and even looking ahead to a Penn State, now raises sort of the athleticism question, because I do think Oregon is a very athletic defensive front, and they definitely got after it against Michigan State, but Michigan State obviously isn't quite that good, and was also banged up generally, and coming off of playing Ohio State, which I think tends to soften teams up a little bit. So I don't want to make too much about what I saw from Oregon's defensive front, but I did come away pretty impressed by what they were doing, and they play a lot of guys too. So I am wanting to ask Chip and Ryan Day just how they're feeling about the progress of the offensive line. Certainly, it's not a complete product at this point. You want your offensive line to keep getting better week after week, and I think Ohio State's offensive line has definitely done that. But this is just a different kind of challenge. So how are they feeling about their offensive line's ability to kind of match athleticism with athleticism to win the battles that they need to win to keep running the ball the way that Ohio State has? That was one of the more impressive rushing performances I've seen from Ohio State against Iowa. And I know they didn't run for 400 yards or whatever, but they hung 200 on a defense that just does not give up 200 yards very often, and hadn't even give up 100 yet this year. And it really just felt like they could do whatever they wanted to do running the ball. And I think they should be confident in their ability to do the same against Oregon based off some of the rushing success that Boise State and even Oregon State a little bit had against Oregon's defense. But this is a challenge nonetheless, and perhaps even more of a challenge in protecting Will Howard and dealing with some aggression and dealing with athleticism. So I would like to kind of take the pulse on where the offensive brain trust feels this line is and handling some of that stuff.
They've got to feel pretty confident. I mean, the results, if you wanted to take them with a grain of salt or factor in the degree of difficulty in the first few weeks of the season, I certainly understood and have said all along, if you want to remain skeptical of that, by all means, do so. I don't think that the coaching staff does. I mean, they're looking at the results compared to they're living through the results of last year versus this year and what they think that this group does well and what they don't do well. They're making decisions. We talked last Tuesday about could there be a change going on at right guard with Austin Cervell raising his game and pushing Tegra Shabola. They didn't do that. They've settled in that game. They appeared to settle on that 5. This is what they're going with. And Iowa's good enough. They're not going to mess around with the rotation. They're going to let these guys go play. They did. They were really effective up front. Like, I don't think Chip Kelly and Justin Fry are like, let's get one more week of validation and then we'll feel good for Oregon. I think they already did, because they wouldn't have approached that game plan the way they did if they didn't have faith in all 5 of those guys to go execute. Now, just because the improvement is noticeable and apparent doesn't mean that you just get to say, oh, that's it, we're done here. Like, you still have to maintain that. And Oregon, as you mentioned, Bill, is going to be a different test. And I think maybe all 4 of those spots up front, maybe some more complete defensive line specific than Iowa's. We'll see. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that or not. We talk about fundamentally sound Iowa football, and they did dial up some of the blitzes that we speculated that they might, and they created some havoc. But in terms of just trying to line up and play, offensive front against defensive line, this is probably a game where Oregon's going to think that they have a chance to win some of those matchups without having to blitz, which then creates a whole nother world of problems for any defense that has to play one-on-one coverage against Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka or a healthy Carnell Tate, and against a quarterback in Will Howard who's been very good when facing pressure, especially from the blitz variety. So, we're going to still find out more about Ohio State up front, to your point. I would be surprised to be like, well, we suddenly feel good just because of what happened against Iowa. I think that's been building for a while.
No, I think so too, and I think that's how it should feel. Like, I'm not concerned about the offensive line, really. The thing that's weird about this game is, like, now that we've gotten to it, is like I don't know if there's any one part of Ohio State that I feel is deficient, like, in a way that worries me.
Right.
It's a matchup game. Oregon's got size and speed and athleticism too, so like Ohio State, I think can lose to Oregon if it doesn't bring its best to Eugene on Saturday. But there have been times, a lot of times, because it's kind of the nature of covering the sport, where Ohio State has arrived at games like this, and you can point to a thing or two just to say to yourself, like, boy, like, I don't know if this is good enough for this kind of game. And I don't know, knock on wood, I suppose, for people who are listening, like, I don't feel that way about anything with this team on either side of the ball. The matchups matter, and Oregon might be able to exploit some of them, but ability to adapt to stuff on the fly and strengths and weaknesses. Like, I think Ohio State's in a really good spot, but you always want to find things that are important for this game, yes, but also might be able to tell you a little something more about the future and what's coming. And like, I look at Oregon's front, I look at Penn State's front, I look at potentially some of the fronts that Ohio State might face once it gets to the college football playoff, some teams from the SEC, and just like the speed of that is just different from what you see week to week in the Big Ten usually, and is different certainly from what Ohio State has seen thus far. So it's just like another box to check, I think, for Ohio State's offensive line as I look at the matchups. But the group has played so well that, like, there were a lot of questions about them coming into the year, which I certainly thought were warranted. I just kind of feel like they've answered a lot of them, if not all of them, already to this point. So I'm excited more than anything else to see how that plays out on Saturday. I'm not really concerned about it.
I think that's a pretty interesting development for Ohio State, is that what you mentioned there, where it's like, if you see something week after week, and it's like, well, it hasn't cost Ohio State in this game. Is it a national title? Trait. Do they have it? Can they get to that point? Is there there hasn't been one thing that you'd say in all 5 games was not deficient, not to the standard Ohio State level. Like, there have been points in games, and we've talked about them coming out of all of them, whether that's on Snap Judgment, Sunday Sound Off, Podcast Daily, whatever. It's like, this thing wasn't that good on Saturday. But if you looked at the other 4 games, like, well, it probably was good in some of those others. It was maybe just one off day or a part of a game plan or something. I can't think of one thing that has happened in all 5 games for Ohio State that's like, that could get them beat. Let's keep talking about that, because I don't think that exists. Even, so use an example. Sonny Styles in the previous couple games, did he play elite football at linebacker against Michigan State or against Marshall? Don't think he did. That happened twice, and then he was phenomenal against Iowa. Tyleik Williams was also back in the lineup. That changed some things. Like, at most, you'd say, well, there was a couple players who didn't have their best games, or the offensive line looked a little bit disjointed in the first half of a game. But then they would bounce back. They would correct it in game. They would correct it the next week. They would, put in a different game plan or a different solution. I can't. Maybe you can. I can't think of one thing that's happened repeatedly over 5 games and be like, well, if that's not corrected by Oregon, they're definitely going to lose. Like, I don't think I could pinpoint one thing like that.
I agree with you. And again, it's not that this is a game that Ohio State can't lose, even if all that's true, because again, Oregon is also good. But I don't see that like chink in the armor. I guess maybe the one thing that has popped up that could be worth asking about is some of the turnovers. Ohio State has given the ball away. Was it 6 times or 5 times in the last 3 games? Twice last week and twice 2 weeks before against Marshall. So I don't know, but even the turnovers, like, to me, aren't like emblematic of a sloppy team. It's like Will Howard threw a pick that, like, I don't have a problem with him throwing the ball there. Just like throw a different different kind of pass. And then Jeremiah Smith fumbled because the guy who might be the best linebacker in the Big Ten like punched the ball out of his arms as he was running down the field, thinking he might score a touchdown. So I'm not saying that turning the ball over is okay. It has helped that Ohio State is still on the plus side when it comes to turnover margin and found a way to even them out. Or no, I guess they were 1 up against Iowa too. So
yeah,
as long as that persists, like, whatever, you just want to make sure you're coming out on the right side of that turnover battle. But I guess there's 2 things with the offense, because I know a lot of people talk about downfield passing. I'm like less fired up about that, I think, than maybe some other people are. Will Howard is about a 50% downfield passer, which is more or less where you want to be. Even if it doesn't always look great, the ball has gotten there enough, in my opinion. And then the turnover thing. So, but even then, it's like they're not, bouncing a ball through their own foot with like regularity. So that just feels like nitpicking to me. And you want Ohio State to be perfect, especially in a game like this, and don't want to be turning the ball over on the road against a good team. So hopefully Ohio State doesn't do that. But aside from those 2 things, I don't even know what really rises to the level of a question with the way that Ohio State is operating, especially on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you could lump the offensive line conversation and the turnovers together with the 4th and 1 that they failed to convert, where it's like,
yeah,
again, that may be grasping at a straw, grasping at something to say, maybe they're not complete yet. Maybe they didn't get the short yardage situation. We've been talking about that for 2 years with the run game, with the offensive line. And then here you go. They had 4th and 1. They had a quarterback who was willing to run, and he's got talked about his Josh Allen traits and his size, and he didn't get a 4th and 1. Like, I think Iowa's good. Would I like to see Ohio State control the line of scrimmage on a 4th and 1 and get short yardage and punch it in the red zone? Definitely want to do that. But there's a lot of that would be, I think, hyper focused on one particular play, when the body of work in the rest of that matchup against Iowa was moving the line of scrimmage consistently and repeatedly and opening up holes. It may be a matter where this could be the first time, and Byrne brought this up on Monday at Roosters, like, I didn't think that was a great call by Chip Kelly. Like that's only happened once so far.
Once, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, you and I were talking during the game on Slack. It's like, maybe I'm not Chip Kelly. I'm not a coach of any kind. Definitely not one of the most decorated offensive minds. But if it were me, and it was, college football video game, like, I think I'd use Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson in some capacity, maybe have them in the backfield. So maybe this would be the first time where, Jim Knowles has had a lot of Tuesdays where he puts his hand up and he's like, the bad calls, those are on me. You put that on me. maybe Chip Kelly will do that later on today.
Yeah, I think at the very least, it's probably worth asking just like thought processes on how you want to attack teams in short yardage. It doesn't have to be 4th and short. It can be 3rd and short too. Like I think Ohio State's been pretty good in short yardage this year. I think they're like 70% on 4th down. Maybe you want to be better than that because it's typically 4th and pretty short. And it's been good on 3rd down too. I haven't dug in on exactly on what it's like in 3rd and short, but anecdotally, it feels like it's been pretty good. But if you're going to go,
they were 6 for 8 going into last week, and then they fell short on the first opportunity.
Right. So like, but even the thought process, like of like, okay, what makes you want to go empty out of the shotgun on 4th and short kind of stuff, right? And then if you do it once, is that enough to steer you away from it again moving forward? So I think we haven't, I guess, spent enough time around Chip Kelly to know whether or not he would entertain that kind of philosophical conversation, particularly in a big game week. But it could be fun. It could be fun even to ask about because I think Chip has mostly been pretty good about just like talking ball and talking about why he does the things he does. So maybe we could ask that. You know,
he might be less inclined to do it depending on if he's getting a ton of questions about going back to Eugene before, by the time we get to that point. Who knows? We'll see how that plays out. What else would be on your mind?
Defensively, as you said, it's going to be a pretty offensive heavy day, but we talked a lot about the 3 linebacker stuff and like it worked against Iowa. So like, no problem. Like they played a lot of 3 linebacker stuff and the linebackers played great and they shut down Caleb Johnson. This is a different game now. Oregon's got speed all over the place. Oregon plays with 2 tight ends sometimes, but even when it does, it kind of reminds me of the stuff that Jim Knowles used to say where like we faced 12 personnel in the Big 12, but it wasn't really 12 personnel. Mm-hmm. So this feels like a game where Jordan Hancock is going to play a lot. And he's a veteran player, so I'm not like worried about him being prepared, but he has only played 37 snaps in the last 2 weeks because of the way that Jim Knowles has elected to defend the past 2 opponents. And I guess maybe I want to ask Ryan Day sort of like how, as you're like planning for the season and you want to be cognizant of matchups and what puts your defense in the best situation, how much are you paying attention to the condition that guys are going to be in when you know they're going to have to count on him? And I'm not talking like physical conditioning. I'm talking like, has Jordan Hancock just been playing enough football the last 2 weeks to now go throw him out there for 70 snaps against Oregon and hope that he holds his own? Like I do wonder a little bit about putting the guys in the best positions to succeed when you're so dedicated to matching personnel the way that Ohio State has been. So like Jordan Hancock's going to be in a spotlight, and like I love Jordan Hancock. I think he's a great player, and I'm glad he's going to get a game where he, like, I assume will be coming off the field very much. But it's still weird to me that guy has only played 37 snaps the last 2 weeks, and now like I don't know. I guess I'm a little worried about rust, I guess, with him because he just has not been put in a lot of positions like he's going to get put in on Saturday. So like I want to ask Ryan Day about that, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of hate myself for feeling this way, that because Ohio State's giving up 7 points a game, did that in the last couple of weeks, and they did that by relying on these 3 linebacker sets, which were working. And like Sonny Styles at Sam, that seems pretty good. That seems to be working along with Arvell and Cody Simon. It's like, but when they have to make that sub and they're matching personnel and I see 7 come to the sideline, I'm just like, oh man, that sucks.
Can't you play 12 guys? Yeah.
I want to watch Jordan Hancock play football, man. Like, safety driven defense. This guy's the nickel. He's the straw that stirs the drink. And it's like, sorry, man, you only get to play 17 snaps today. And it's like, I only get to watch him play 17. And it's like, again, it's one of those things that we're evaluating this team, and they've got a plan for what they want to do. They're executing it at an incredibly high level. And it's, I guess this may be the first time that I'm saying it out loud, where we've had for years, 12 previous years, 13th season for me covering the team, where it's like, hey, don't you want to be able to get Curtis Samuel 15 touches and, still use your wide receivers? And then you got this talented backfield. Like, how are you going to manage all these touches for your skill players? And it's always an offensive conversation. And now I'm like, they have so many freaking good defensive players. It's like,
Mhm.
can't you play them all 40 snaps a game? What's wrong with you? Keep them out there.
Yeah, I mean, they could rotate, right, more than they have. It's like we're either playing 4-3 or we're playing our base nickel, and there's no in between. So it's like, well, I guess like Jordan Hancock did play 20 snaps against Iowa, which is, I don't know, 10 more than I would have guessed coming into that game. So
Right.
I guess it's good that he got that action. It's not, I'm not trying to be alarmist about it. It's just, again, it's like you're searching for things to kind of be like, well, I wonder about this going into a matchup like Ohio State's facing with Oregon. So that is the one thing. Like they just played a lot of 4-3 the last 2 weeks, and I don't think they're going to play much, if any of it, against Oregon. So you're changing your defense and you're changing your rules, and it's good that Ohio State is a veteran defense, so it should be able to go through that no problem. But you just kind of compound it a little bit when you're making that change, and then also the other team has really good players. So it's not a concern, just a curiosity.
I had one as well coming out of Saturday, which, again, you have to put it in perspective that it didn't change anything. It didn't matter. Although they did give up a couple 3rd and longs to Iowa, which I was a little bit, stunned. I think probably everyone was stunned to see Iowa moving the ball through the air on 3rd and long. But like, I wonder, and I don't know if Ryan Day is going to weigh in on this. Probably won't. I wish that Jim Knowles or Larry Johnson could, because I feel like when I'm watching, Tyleik Williams is just absolutely destroying pockets. Does he have to come off the field in the Rushman situation? And he can't play every single snap. Just admitted that. I know that. He doesn't need to play 60 snaps a game for Ohio State. That probably wouldn't be very effective for anyone. But like, he can rush the passer and create a lot of problems, and is still athletic enough to, bring somebody down. If Dylan Gabriel tried to scramble up the middle, I don't think he would get very far with Tyleik Williams right there. But beyond that, if you do take him off, when I look at the Rushman package and Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson are on the inside and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer on the outside, I don't understand it.
It's weird.
It seems to be negating the physical strengths and traits of the guys who are out there. And it's not always been the case. They haven't been stagnant and lined them up in the same 4 guys in the same 4 spots all year long. So maybe there was something about Iowa specifically that they thought lended itself to that matchup. But like, it's curious to me, and I don't really understand it.
I just know that when I feel like every time Tyleik Williams is out there and the other team is trying to throw the ball, he is pushing a center or a guard directly into the quarterback slab.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. They should be finding opportunities to rest Tyleik so that he doesn't have to play every single high leverage snap. But I don't know if I want that on money downs. I think the idea is to try to, and I thought the pressure was good against K McNamara, so I'm not saying it was bad, but the Rushman package to me has always been about just getting the 4 guys out there who are going to pin their ears back and just terrorize an offensive line. And like Tyleik to me is one of those guys. He can really rush the passer, even though he's 320 pounds and 6'2" or 6'3", whatever he is. So again, it feels a little nitpicky, I guess, but I that's all I thought about when I was watching the Rushman package. I thought being at times a little ineffective, especially on the interior. It's like, why isn't Tyleik out there? So, and maybe it's because he was coming off of whatever he was coming off of, and they didn't want to quite throw him out there. So maybe he'll do it against Oregon. But I think you should have your best pass rushers on the field when you're doing that. And to me, Tyleik Williams, even though he's a tackle, is one of, if not Ohio State's best pass rusher.
I just feel like, especially when we're talking about Rushman situations, and if you want to use Caden Curry on the inside because you like his speed and motor one-on-one against the guard, like, I don't think if he's standing next to Kenyatta Jackson that like he's not definitely going to get a one-on-one matchup, because you don't have to devote 2 guys to either one of them necessarily the way you would with Tyleik Williams, because if you give him a one-on-one matchup, he's going to pick up his blocker and he's going to throw him into the quarterback's face is what's going to happen. So I don't know. Again, it's like, I understand that that is nitpicking, and I'm not saying that it is a problem that's going to hurt Ohio State in a game. I just am trying to contextualize and understand why they're making those decisions, because that's what the point of the podcast daily is.
We just want to watch cool football players do cool stuff.
Yeah, that's the thesis of the show. We like
Yeah.
cool things, and Ohio State has more cool things than any other program in the country, which is
It
why
does.
they get to go play a top 3 matchup on the road at Oregon on Saturday, 4:30 Pacific time, 7:30 Eastern time. Do you have anything else?
Well, I was going to ask, like, how I guess one, because I don't know this because I'm bad at my job. Do you know when Ohio State is leaving? And two, what do you
Yeah,
make of the travel involved here? Do you think it actually has all that much of an impact?
they're leaving Friday. I believe my understanding is that they will have their normal walkthrough. Because of traveling east to west, you recoup the time. So, sort of the way we understand it is like it's different than the teams that have to go west to east and they lose all that time, and it's maybe a more difficult adjustment. So we had thought maybe there would be a possibility of these games. Could Ohio State go out on Thursday? That's not what they're going to do. They're gonna have a walkthrough. They're gonna fly out there. They'll still arrive in the afternoon there on Friday and basically go through normal business. I don't think it's there's been a lot of conversation and you've got the information at your fingertips. The teams that have struggled going across multiple time zones. Ohio State is not making this out to be a bigger deal, which I actually think makes sense. If you said, boy, here we go, it's going to be really daunting to fly across the country, and we're going to go a day early and we're going to do all these extra things that we don't normally do and get them out of their routine, which again, they've only been on the road once this season. So maybe, you could say, well, how's that a problem? They don't have a routine. They haven't played on the road enough. Like these guys that have been in the program for multiple years, the veterans, like they know what it's like. I think if you treat it like every other one, that actually makes sense to me. So I don't think it's a big deal. It has become a big topic of conversation in the new era of Big Ten football that is coast to coast, that only one team has gone multiple time zones in one. But as you looked up, there may be a good reason for that. Maybe they're just bad football teams or not favored to win these games in the first place.
Yeah, they're not the only two instances. I believe I have this right, just based on what I can remember about the betting lines. The only two instances of someone traveling more than 2 time zones and then losing a game that it was favored to win has been USC losing at Michigan, and USC losing at Minnesota. So all the other ones, like Penn State was a huge favorite against UCLA.
I'm sorry, I said bad football teams. I meant bad football team.
Team. Penn State was a huge favorite against UCLA. Washington was favored against Michigan this week, despite Michigan being a ranked team and Washington not being. I'm pretty sure Rutgers was favored over Washington. USC was favored over Wisconsin. Oregon was definitely favored over Michigan State this past weekend, and Washington was favored at home against Northwestern. So Indiana is a team that got the win, but also UCLA sucks. So like Indiana, I can't remember what that line was, but like Indiana should have won that game. So I think it's going to get talked about a lot this week. I actually don't think it has a ton of bearing on this matchup. I'd be worried about it if Ohio State has to go play at Oregon, come back home, and then like fly back out to USC kind of thing. But that's not what Ohio State is doing. This is its only West Coast trip this year. I feel bad for the guy that drives the equipment truck, I guess, but I don't know that this is a major impact on Ohio State. So
I mean,
it'll get asked about, but I don't think it matters all that much.
I think the logistics are fascinating because driving that truck from Columbus to Eugene does not sound very fun, but this is what it's going to be like when you have USC playing Rutgers or UCLA playing Rutgers this year, right? That's the longest from the very tips of both coasts, or what Miami had to do with playing at Cal last week. Like,
yeah, that's a crazy one.
Those
Miami to Berkeley, California is insane.
Like that stuff is ridiculous. And I've talked to people the last couple of weeks about, managing that stuff and what are you supposed to do? Could the Big Ten, put equipment somewhere on, station it somewhere on the West Coast to help these teams so they don't have to travel everything? It's like, there's really not a solution for that because the pads are personalized, the helmets are all personal. Like you have to move those. That's the way that football is played. And like, so there's no easy solution for that. And there's no easy solution for making a flight. I think Ohio State's taking like a larger plane than normal as well to try and accommodate for that, the length of the travel. But like, there's not everyone's going to be able to do that. And I guess my point there is that Ohio State is better equipped financially, logistically, support staff wise than anybody else to make this as painless as it possibly can be. But the ones that are going to lose in this, and why you'll see that stat skewed over time, is like Rutgers and Maryland are not in the same financial situation, even though they share the same broadcast deals to maneuver coast to coast. I think that this trend is probably going to stay as lopsided, maybe not quite as lopsided. It's always going to favor the home team in these games in the Big Ten over the long haul, but it may not impact Ohio State specifically.
Yeah, I don't think so. I was just looking at so Washington played at Rutgers, then was home, then now has to go play at Iowa, then is off, and has to go play at Indiana. Like, if we were stacking stuff like that, I'd be a little more concerned about it. But that's not the case for Ohio State this year.
Well, those teams didn't have to join the Big Ten.
No, I'm not saying feel bad for them. I'm just saying, it's a new talking point for the conference and an easy one, so you're going to hear a lot about it. But I don't feel that it is applicable to this game.
Well, that's the other thing about the 2 time zone situation. Like, Ohio State is only going to have to do it once this year, but every time that those 4 teams, Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and USC, travel east, that's what they're going to face. Like, they should be worried about that stat, but I don't think Ohio State needs to be.
Yeah, right. I agree.
But that's what the money's for. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast daily. It is a Talking Tuesday. We're going to be in the Woody later. Later, we'll have snap judgments. Afterwards, we'll stream the press conference live on the podcast as well. Still got Buckeye Q and everything else coming. Kings of Columbus, Kings of the North throughout the week ahead as we get ready for one of the biggest games of the college football season, and certainly one of the biggest for the Ohio State Buckeyes. For Bill, I am Austin. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you later.